All right, we are live, and this is another casual fireside chat that we're doing on our social channels to share some key, cherry pick some learnings of the earlier workshop that we just came out of. So it was a really good session. Thanks so much for preparing and sharing a bunch of valuable things about communications. What's your feeling coming out of the workshop?
It was good. I'm always happy to share and talk about these things because it's a topic that's close to heart, and one of my main drivers is to extract other people's potential. So anything I can do, I mean, even if we talk for 45 minutes, but if they take one small thing and that makes them a better leader or a better employee or a better entrepreneur, then I've done my job and I'm happy about that. So.
Awesome. So before we dive in, do you just quickly want to mention, like, we've known each other since before and we work together, and the reason why I'm so excited also to have you here is because I've seen you in action navigate internal communication in a very challenging environments, but with balancing both logic and empathy and sympathy for the different situations. So do you just want to quickly mention like your background and who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. I've spent about 6 years, just over 6 years in startups, tech startups, bang in the middle of the visionary founders and board members and investors, and then the operational floor, so to speak, the operational people and organization, and kind of had operational roles there in the middle, trying to navigate everything from pressure to goals to vision down into the execution of that. I also have experience from starting my own brand, sourcing, designing, and launching my own soft goods products on an e-commerce. Did that trip, and also before I even entered tech, I have over a decade as a technician, designer, and a technical project manager in film, TV, and event industry. So I've done a lot and a broad kind of palette of things.
Awesome. And let's dive right into it. Before we get started, if anyone tuning in and want to jump in and ask a question, then just feel free to write it in the chat, whether you're on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. Probably on LinkedIn or Facebook. So just write it in. Happy to bring it up. Let's start from the beginning. Like, how, from your point of view, how do I improve my leadership?
I mean, leadership is such a broad word, and leadership has such many aspects of it. What I like to focus on is communication and how you become a better communicator, because that kind of brings along all the other things. There is research. I just read an article earlier today that the biggest kind of impact you have as a leader is empathy. But then again, I mean, communication comes into empathy as well. How do you get that empathy across? How do you get that that across to your team, and how do you get that respect from your peers? Is again communication, not verbal, but also non-verbal communication, your body language. And I think I would start there. That's where I noticed that I had the biggest gaps. That's where I noticed where I had my biggest improvements to do early on. That helped me a lot. So understanding your own communication, understanding the impact of your communication. I think that's a good. Good.
When you say non-verbal communication, what do you mean? What do you mean with that?
Vocals, like how I talk. Am I always on a high pitch? Am I always leaning forward? Am I always waving my arms like this, or am I slow? Am I talking quiet? Am I crunched down? Like all of these aspects in how you get your voice and your point and your energy across is nonverbal. So if
Yeah.
you meet me and look at me, do you feel like, what does that say? Does it say that I'm something like this? Yeah, you'll probably not want to even look at it. So why should you then listen to it? So that's a nonverbal, the nonverbal part of communication.
Got it. And we talked about a bunch of different things on the session, and I'll bring up cherry pick a couple of the topics that you mentioned that I feel like, okay, let's jump in and talk casually about those things. One thing that I when we started planning the workshop, one thing that got like stuck with me mentally was the walk and talk gap that you covered, went a little bit deeper on during the session, but a personal reflection of mine is time management and having respect, being disciplined, coming in time, and respecting people's time and that for me is a big challenge as a leader, because like it's not that I don't respect other people's time, I just have difficulties coming in time for certain meetings and not deviating from the topics of that specific meeting. And that for me is like, if I really believe that I respect other people's time, then I should be in time, right? And there's like emotional, like I honestly feel that I have tremendous respect for people's time, right? But then again, I didn't show up on time. Like what are we like? So there's a gap personally for me between the walk and talk, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as we mentioned before, like everyone has a gap somewhere. But yours is like time management. Yeah, I mean, time management comes back to respect. And how are you a respectful person? It might not always only be coming in time to meetings, but don't expect everyone else to come on time to your meetings when you are on time if you never.
Exactly.
And if you expect that from other people, then they expect that from you. And I think that's kind of the fundamental thing.
I get really annoyed when people are late to meetings.
Yeah, exactly. And but that does not mean that that's an issue for your organization. I mean, we can look at it from a bunch of different levels, but some people have their schedule extremely tight because they need to. And sometimes you just have to, like, oh, well, I have to wait for this person because this person has so much other important things to do. And sometimes that drags, and yeah, that's just it. That might not even be an issue. It might be a bit frustrating, but you can still come across and I can still respect this person, but not necessarily only on that. But then again, if I then tell people, and my main feedback to people is, well, you're never on time. Well, so back to you.
Yeah.
And then
why are you never on time?
Exactly. And then and then kind of respect kind of goes from there. So it's the gaps, no matter what it is, it's also a matter of fact of like, how important is this gap to close right now?
Yep.
And in what situations and so on. So obviously you shouldn't have big gaps anywhere, but everyone has.
Yeah. Why does internal communication matter?
I think that matters and is key because especially in startups, since this is kind of the perspective we have in this conversation, there's a vision, there's a potential, there's a problem, there's a potential market and solution, and there's a vision to fix that. Translating the finding and the solution and the potential into actual kind of execution needs to be communicated if there's more than two people. And that's why, like, setting up strategies and setting up kind of frameworks and guidelines on how we communicate as an organization could be key. I'm not saying that you should try to be bigger than you are, but I mean, a framework is the lines of a football pitch. You know when the ball is out and when it's in. And if the ball is out, you understand, oh, the ball is out, let's put it back in. Or you can see, well, here the grass is much greener. This is a better place to play football at. So let's just redraw the lines here and keep playing here. That's what a framework is. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. But if you don't have them, when do you know when it's goal? When do you know when it's a corner kick? When do you know? You don't. You just play, and then there's a referee that self-outsources referee saying, oh, that was out, and the other says, well, was it really? So, and that's what a framework is, basically. And that's why internal communication matters, because if you don't have internal communications, you don't have lines on your football pitch.
Yep. It's a good point. One of my favorite leaders or sources of inspiration is Brian Chesky, co-founder CEO of Airbnb. Yeah. I'm always extremely impressed by his humble, honest, and transparent execution, while also being very, very clear with the purpose and the vision, and like, I think he basically like encapsulates this in a very strong way. Yeah. And basically, he behaves the same way internally as externally. Like, it feels like it's like he has this, like the wheel that you talked about, like the catch framework. It feels like he's maxing on all those different ways.
He most likely is. But I think, and that's the strength. And I see we can look at a lot of other leaders out there, and we can see the same things from other leaders. And I usually say that it's not necessarily about being a nice guy or a girl. It's being clear on who you are. That is the important. Like, this is who I am. This is how I lead, and this is how I get results, and this is how we as an organization will get. And if you are clear on these things, then you can be hard and tough, but not being an asshole, so to speak. You don't need to, because the expectations and the lines are clear. Yeah. And I think that is what I see in the leaders I respect and look up to. There are various different types of people and different type of leaders, but the common ground there is they're clear. Yeah, this is how we do it. This is how I do it. I want people who like to work like this. And that should be fine. And if you don't like it, well, then there's other places to work. But that doesn't mean that they're bad people.
Yeah. I think it's like, you could be a really, really tough leader if you're working with people who likes or thrives in that environment, as long as you're clear, right?
Exactly.
Because then expectations are super aligned.
Yeah, right? And then it's so easy. Then you don't need to have the uncomfortable conversations with people. It's more like, this is how we want to do it. Can you deliver on that? Yes or no? Well, I can't. Okay. Yeah. Then let's not keep doing this. And it's it's so easy to sit here and say it, but the conversation becomes so easy. If the expectations are blurry and we don't need that, then it's so much about, well, my gut feels tells you, well, then that's not a great conversation to have, and you shouldn't need to do it. So I think stay true to that and to you as a leader, but make sure to kind of make the frames and the processes and all of that, make them clear. Like, this is how I want to lead. This is how I want to work. This is how we make results. I think that's important.
When we talked about the different thing that like when it goes wrong, right? Based on your experience and the way you look at communications, what are the early warning signals of a misaligned team, according to you? How can you be, like, as you mentioned, everyone has areas to work with, and there's things that you can improve, of course, all the time. But what are the early signals to sort of look for if you haven't, like, if you're not sure where to work on, what part of your internal communication you should improve, or yourself as a leader?
I mean, I look for, when I come into a group or an organization, or even that I'm working in or that I'm helping or whatever, I look for two things. I look for frustration and I look for like unnecessary repetition.
Yeah.
Because
what do you mean?
But if, like, repetition is not a bad thing per se. If you repeat things, you create kind of a pattern, you create comfort, you create routines and habits. But if you need to repeat yourself, or if someone needs to, like, repeat themselves because they're not getting through, then there's a communication issue. There's not a it's not an understanding issue, it's a communication issue.
Yep.
And if there's frustration in getting through or getting across or talking, then there's also a communication issue somewhere. So
Yep.
Those are two kind of signs I look for. And then you have to dive into those and look, like, what are they coming from? Is it the gap between the walk and your talk? Are you expecting things, but you're explaining them in a different things? Or are you saying that you're expecting this, but you're reacting on other expectations and stuff like that? Well, then nobody's ever gonna be able to, fulfill that expectations, and most likely will burn those people out, and they will quit, or you burn yourself out, or both. But then also look at, why are we not understanding? Is there something in the message that's not right? Haven't I done my homework to understand what we're trying to achieve? Or am I trying to deliver too much? So just take those two things and kind of dig deeper into them. Why is this occurring? And then you'll pretty much see if it's a body language thing, it's a verbal thing, or if it's just the case in itself, you haven't done enough homework.
Yeah, it feels like I totally agree that makes sense. It also feels like, when I've looked at organizations and been part of those teams myself, and haven't been like the chief executive, whatever, I've, like, that frustration. For me, it's like, with high level of alignment and clarity, stress is just like, it's good. Like, people have a sense of urgency. It's like, people know we need to move fast, right? And they know why. Negative stress, in my experience, is often the result of unclear direction from the leaders, and people start talking, or like, what's your task, what's mine, why can't we do this and that? That's also culture and values as well, but that's also set with communication.
But it's not culture and values, because it is communication. Because you can have the best culture and great values in the company, but if the leadership can't convey where we're going and how we're trying to do it, you're still stress people out.
Yeah.
So but how you build good culture, will build upon good culture and stuff, is great communication. Then that's just another good layer on the culture. So
yeah.
I think you shouldn't kind of put those two necessarily in the same box, the culture and values and communication. Mm-hmm. They feed on each other, obviously, but it's not the same thing. And I agree. Like unclear expectations is without knowing studies and stuff, is, in my experience, the number one factor of stress, burnout, and things taking the double time, burning money on the wrong thing. It's unclear expectations. And the second thing is unclear communication in the sense of like documentation, like how are we going to do this? What is the demands from business? What is the demands from blah blah blah? Example, when you're creating a feature, like if you don't do that, then you'll have to redo it 6 or 7 times. And in startups, you don't have that time. So.
Or you want to do it 6 or 7 times because you're just like running for it. And that brings me to my next point.
Yeah.
Nice segue, right?
Yeah.
Context switching versus being iterative. Here is like, obviously one thing is more fueled with negative thoughts, and the other one is a standard term and very, very, very popular way to operate in an organization, especially around product development. Do you want to just quickly mention how those are different from each other and should not be confused?
Yeah, I mean, being iterative is a necessity. You're not always right the first time. You're not always right the second, third, or fourth time. And even if your first time it's good, it can always be better. And being iterative is a necessity to kind of constantly kind of shape that and become better and grow. But context switching is something else. It's, if you look at the team as what direction they are looking at, and then all of a sudden they're going to look right. And then all of a sudden they're going to turn around and look at their 6. And then all of a sudden they're going to turn around and look left again. Every time a person does that, they need to recalibrate. Literally, they need to recalibrate their brain. But to understand when iterativeness becomes negative is, you need to understand people want to do their good work well. People want to finish tasks. And people in general want to do a good job. But being iterative is always like, okay, let's do this. Let's try this, close it, deliver it, look at it, take it back. It didn't work. Let's do again. And then maybe switch to something else, do the same thing. That's still iterative.
Yep.
But just doing, maybe not finishing it, switching to another, doing a bit there, then switching here to, and never closing things, just opening things, then the context switching there becomes extremely confusing, and you're doing a lot, but you're getting nowhere. So I think
fake work.
Yeah, super fake work.
Yeah.
And you have like 80 or 70% of a lot of things, and you have nothing that's 100%. And maybe you don't need 100%, but you need to at least pass the 90 to 92% line on the fundamentals in a company. And if you context switch too much, you never will.
Yep.
I think that's kind of
where
I do the separation.
Yeah, that's good. So to wrap things up, I know you're on a tight schedule. I don't want to hold you longer than necessary. Do you just want to like summarize with a few sentences your key messages from the workshop, or your general thoughts on how to be a very, very good communicative leader?
The first thing that I talk to everyone about anything, if I coach or if I help or anything, is awareness. Be aware of what you're trying to do, and be aware of what you're trying to get other people to do. And if you are aware, then you have the possibility to kind of get better at it. If you're not aware and ignorant to that, then you're not getting anywhere. So I think awareness is kind of the number one key in becoming better at communicating and becoming better at anything, is awareness. And I shared a few tools in our session earlier that you can help you with that awareness. But understand the impact of communication. I think that's most important. Bad communication impacts really heavy. Great communication impacts even heavier, but it takes so much longer time to get there. So you can be on a good path and then have a few weeks or a few months or something with really bad communication, and you have to restart. And that can bring a company to its end. So understand that, the impact of your communication as a leader and your adaptiveness in communication. Who am I talking to? What am I talking about? What do people need to hear? What do they not need to hear? I think if you have those two perspectives, then you're on a good way to become a great communicative leader, I think. Awareness and the perspective of what and how and the impact of it.
Nice. That's a great summary. And again, Daniel, really appreciate you taking time. And we'll be doing more of those fireside chats. Sometimes it's just my mother listening. Sometimes I hope that one or two lessons will be shared, and if it helps a founder, mission completed. So we'll be
as I said in the beginning, I mean, if anyone just takes one little small bit and that helps them on their journey, then I'm super happy about that.
Yeah. How does one reach out to you?
Easiest way business-wise to get a hold of me is LinkedIn. Send me a message and just get a hold of me there. So Daniel Ekstam, just search for me on LinkedIn and give me a message and we'll talk. Don't feel afraid. Shout me anything. I'm super happy answering questions and do whatever I can to point you in the direction.
Nice. And thanks, Malcolm and Said, for the likes. Really nice. And those who tuned in, hi and thanks for listening. And everyone have a great communicative afternoon and evening.
Yeah, I always end every Monday meeting with talk to each other, help each other, and then let's go be productive.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, man. See ya.
Thank you. Bye.